headquarters of the United States Air Force in Europe. The jets involved were two-seater ground attack aircraft, the MB339A. This report from David Loyne in London.
The accident happened as the Italian Air Force equivalent of our Red Arrows, the Frecce Tricolori team, were completing a manoeuvre. After rising spectacularly, the planes divided into two groups. The disaster happened as they tried to cross just 200 feet from the ground. One of the planes ploughed into a crowd of spectators. Another crashed into the runway and burst into flames close to the VIP stand. A third plane was dragged to the ground with the two that collided. The MB339A trainer is capable of doing 500 miles an hour. The combined closing speed of the collision is believed to have killed the pilots and sent wreckage across the airfield. West German rescue workers joined American soldiers and airmen to cope with a series of fires which broke out. Ambulances with special burns equipment have been ferrying injured survivors to hospital. But many spectators were beyond help. There'd been concern about safety before the air show. Local politicians and environmental groups had demanded the show should be cancelled. One politician accused the Americans of arrogance in letting the show go ahead.
Intended as a demonstration of the Italian Air Force's precision flying. A formation of jets, 10 in all, were performing one of their most difficult maneuvers over the American Air Force base. The aircraft divided into two groups and were meant to pass within feet of each other in opposite directions. Instead, they collided. Three aircraft were destroyed. The pilots and at least 30 spectators are known to have died. Over 100 others in the crowd were injured. Most were American servicemen and their families, others German civilians. Amid the panic, destruction. Many of the injured suffered severe burns. Spectators ran to help as emergency vehicles raced to the scene. It's now emerged that many locals had demanded the cancellation of this air show because of public concern about low-level flying. The injured lay scattered across the airfield, receiving emergency aid from those at the scene. The German Defense Minister had only last month reduced the number of such flights in response to the strength of public opinion. Officials at the local hospitals here described the scene as a madhouse. It's now thought likely the air show will be cancelled in future years. It was intended as a demonstration of precision flying by the Italian Air Force. A formation of jets, 10 in all, divided into three groups and were meant to pass within feet of each other in opposite directions. Instead, they were heading for disaster. From another angle, the complex maneuver can be seen again, with one pilot peeling off from the main group of aircraft, returning to the formation at high speed to complete the display. His plane catapulted into hundreds of spectators. People fled for their lives as burning debris and aircraft wreckage crashed into the crowds. Amid the panic that followed, destruction. Parked cars ablaze after the impact. Spectators and airbase personnel ran to help the injured and dying, and emergency vehicles raced to the scene. Of the 200,000 people there, most of the dead and injured were either American servicemen and their families or German civilians. A helicopter was almost immediately on the scene, transferring the casualties to local hospitals. Many of the 500 injured are said to be in a very critical condition, mainly suffering from severe burns and impact wounds. As the toll of the injured and dead is still being counted tonight, it's now emerged that many locals had demanded the cancellation of this air show because of public concern about low-level flying.
The Frecce Tricolori are Italy's equivalent of the Red Arrows, flying 10 two-seater advanced training aircraft. The heart sequence is one of the most difficult aerobatic manoeuvres they perform, but a plane split up at around 10,000 feet into two groups and a singleton. They loop away from and then towards each other to cross in front of the spectators. Here the singleton plane comes in towards the crowd, supposedly to pass above or below the two converging formations. From a different angle, the approaching aircraft which is hit breaks up and crashes into the airfield, taking another plane with it. In slow motion, it appears the singleton attempts too late to gain height. And from the side angle, it seems that the two formations have passed when the solo plane hits. The manoeuvre starts well, with a good break at the top of the climb. The singleton flies away and starts to loop in towards the runway at about 90 degrees. All appears mechanically sound, and it flies in straight and level, although it does seem that for some reason its wheels are down. The formation lining up on the left-hand side of the runway runs in on its passing approach. The singleton will now have visual contact with it. All 10 aircraft are now committed to their passing runs, the two formations separated only by the width of the runway. A split second from the collision, and it's too late now for anyone to do anything. The gap between the aircraft is not enough. The moment of impact, and the singleton hurtles towards the crowd.
One could see the two formations and the single aeroplane, and it appears that the single aeroplane coincided with one of the formations on the crossover maneuver.
Is the maneuver you saw a particularly dangerous one?
Well, I don't think it's dangerous, provided the timing is correct and provided the margins are adequate. One can only assume that the timing went wrong and the margins were just not there, but apart from that, one cannot say why.
Pilots are flying aircraft to the limits of handling and performance when they're involved in formation flying, when they're involved in demonstration flying. They're very skillful pilots, they're very experienced, they're well disciplined, and they are well controlled by the Flying Control Committee, who will lay down minimum altitudes and other things to do everything possible to make it as safe as it can be.
The display team have one of the finest records and reputations for aerobatic flying in the world, performing at air shows since 1930. Only 3 times before in the last 10 years have members of the team been killed in air crashes. One of them gave his own life to steer his doomed plane away from crowds at Mildenhall Hall in Suffolk. Tonight, as the inquiries start, the future of the team and future displays like theirs are under review across Europe.
There's a special number.